Hi guys! Today we'll be recapping a story called Lord Baby Runs a Romance Fantasy with Cash. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot. Enjoy! An angel who introduced himself as the messenger of god Aftanes suddenly descends from above, bearing the good news of an opportunity to be reincarnated. However, the person he offers an opportunity to isn't happy at all. Looking back, she struggled to meet her manager's expectations at work. It was a never-ending, exhausting daily routine, yet they shoved in her face how replaceable she was despite her hard work. However, the only thing that kept her alive was reading Rofan novels. When the heroine decided to leave her house, despite growing up in a golden spoon with a handsome father and brothers, she expressed herself in the comment section, asking if she could be the daughter instead of her. Suddenly, a bright light flashed before her eyes. She got hit by the legendary reincarnation truck. Now sitting beside her lifeless body, the angel hopes she'll enjoy the world created by their god. Aftanes created the world while taking inspiration from various things. Among them, the most inspiration came from romance fantasy novels, specifically designed for her, a devoted fan of Rofan novels. Still, she doesn't understand why she was chosen to reincarnate. However, Aftanes noticed that she has commented on every novel that the god has ever read. And with that last comment, it perfectly makes sense. So this god Aftanes thinks she'll adapt well in the world he created. Wait, it sounds like she was murdered by the god to reincarnate in his world. I don't trust this guy. Her doubts still linger upon the angel's explanation, but she has nothing to lose in this gamble. After all, she's already dead. Still, she hesitates to agree, realizing that she might end up as a trashy character in the novel. And so, she starts to name her conditions, including a special ability. The angel has no problem with that, despite her demands. So she finally agrees to be reincarnated, thinking that it would be a reward for all the hardship she went through. As soon as she utters the words, a contract has just been established. Suddenly, a black portal emerges in the sky as it swallows up her body. She tries to cancel the contract, but the angel, now seemingly has ulterior motives, just smiles with a hidden motive in his eyes. As she gets swallowed up by the portal, the angel assures her not to worry about her abilities, for he has granted something that suits her best, further claiming that she belongs to him. In the novel world, she finds herself reincarnated as a little girl, scrubbing the floor with a brush, cursing the angel for deceiving her. What? Where's the life the angel promised to her? This poor little girl whimpers in sorrow, regretting her decision on the matter. Maybe she shouldn't have reincarnated back then. Suddenly, her uncle, the Marquis, scolds her for being lazy at work, to which she quickly apologizes for. He then further calls her out not to call him uncle because she may not be the Duke's real daughter. Excuse me, sir, are you accusing our lovely girl here? She trembles at his remarks, reminiscing how she used to have a lavish and beautiful life, born into a good family. But one day, everything fell apart. She clearly isn't the heroine of this world. Her cousin Clady, who would have been the heroine, isn't helping at all. She herself is a bully by nature, just like her father. That night, she suffers from her aching wound with no dinner for a week, meaning she just has to survive on one meal a day. How cruel! Clady isn't really of a big help. Although she is her cousin, she speaks like her father about the food cost. My God, sir, she's just a small and fragile child. She doesn't eat like a soldier who hasn't eaten for days. Also, her uncle mocks her for being unable to use magic at all. Quietly sobbing on her bed, she starts to blame the angel for promising her nothing but a miserable life. Even so, she has to survive in this zero-star world. Later on, Clady celebrates her birthday. The nobles praise her dress worth as much as the whole mansion. Her uncle keeps nagging her about food costs as if she eats like a giant being. On the other hand, seeing how Clady has been praised by everyone, she feels unloved. Just then, Clady asks to wipe off the stain from the shoe, without anyone helping her, even the other servants. She's mocked despite the presence of the nobles around. She endures it even if her hands tremble at Clady's remarks. Suddenly, a man with dark hair deeper than the abyss and eyes squinting redder than roses tainted by pigeon blood, arrives at the birthday banquet. He doesn't remember that his daughter was born blonde. Why does he look so familiar? He looks like someone I'm going to end up in life with. She looks at her father earnestly, recognizing him as the Duke Feyreton. Duke Feyreton pierces his gaze upon his brother, the Marquis, who obviously wasn't expecting his brother's early return from the war. When the Duke asks for the identity of the child in front of him, the Marquise tries to reason out that she's just another servant in the house. In her mind, the Duke obviously isn't happy that she is his own blood, but even so, she still boldly asks the Duke to take her with him. She then promises to do everything, including cleaning, just to get out of the Marquise's mansion. Her eyes sprinkle with tears, asking the Duke to take her home. When the Duke tells her that she's so bold at asking, she abruptly speaks out the truth. She's apparently his child. The Duke, with a scary face, lifts her up like a puppy and asks his assistant to immediately go back. Just like that, her life as a servant finally closes its chapter. Meanwhile, Clady suffers from great humiliation upon seeing her lavish dress turn into a ragged one. As they're heading out, the Duke's remarks remain in the Marquise mansion, telling him that he has to be greedy to be greedy. 10 days later, she woke up in a comfortable bed and her health recovered quickly. However, the Duke never comes to visit. It doesn't mean that she really wants to see him, given how she acted embarrassingly last time, but at least in his care, no one beats her and she doesn't have to starve. And so she decides that she wants to stay in the Duke's mansion. In order to do that, she must figure out what kind of person he is, even though their distance seems like on the other side of the long bridge. No matter how she analyzes it, the Duke seems to be a good person, so in order to give back his kindness, she must pay for the meal first. She then starts cleaning the window of the mansion, thinking that an abandoned child can never become a kid again. The servants try to stop her, but only then, when the Duke comes, that she stops doing useless things. The Duke grabs her waist and carries her into the dining hall, asking if she's hungry. Poor child, she has abandonment trauma, so every time the Duke carries her, she'd think that the Duke will throw her out again. In the dining hall, the Duke coldly asks her to continue eating. However, her belly is already about to burst. God, he must really work on that deadly personality in front of the child. Luckily, one of the servants, Anna, addresses this concern to the Duke. Just then, the Duke appoints her as the child's lady-in-waiting. Realizing how she just got a dedicated servant, she asks the Duke if she could stay in the mansion, to which the Duke blatantly calls nonsense. After that, a deafening silence envelops the room. Feeling the awkwardness in the atmosphere as the Duke keeps staring at her coldly. Thankfully, the Duke's assistant delivers the news that the Imperial Palace wants to summon him for his early return. Before he leaves, he clearly instructs the child not to do anything foolish. The child responds well, but at the back of her mind, she's furious that he didn't notice how she has cleaned the window pane so spotlessly. Life is difficult for her, but at least she doesn't have to worry about filling her stomach anytime she gets hungry. In her room, Anna explains that she doesn't have to do chores anymore because the Duke doesn't intend on abandoning her. There, she realizes that all the people around her worry and care for her well-being. She's different from other young masters, but being reincarnated is not something normal at all. But at this moment, this is the first time she feels the living energy of people. That night, she remembers what Anna said. If she's the real daughter of the Duke, she doesn't have to feel so insecure, but she still worries of being an illegitimate child, just like what her uncle said. A mother she has never seen before, despite hearing about her all her life. More than anything, the Duke with jet black hair, blood-red eyes, and a face as sharp as a refined sword are nothing in common to her soft pink hair like springtime petals, and crystal blue eyes like Paraba gemstone. If her uncle's words are true, she might not end up being kicked out, but being beheaded instead. So if she wants to survive, she has to put in her efforts like a real daughter. She can pull it off because she's a pro-romance fantasy reader who has read thousands of romance fantasy novels. Morning comes. She stands before the Duke's room, counting to 10 before entering. However, before she can even start, the Duke's assistant opens the door. The Duke sits on a couch with his chest barely exposed. Oh God, he's so fine! The child rushes to his side and hugs his legs, telling him that she misses him. Everyone in the room is in shock of how the child reacts upon seeing the Duke. But she's now unstoppable. The Duke is aware that he is making her uncomfortable, but she's just unfamiliar with the feeling with a father on her side. So sticking together will help increase affection even when he learns that she's not his real daughter. She then places her palms onto his cheeks, feeling the softness of his skin. Suddenly, a notification pops up stating that the conditions are already met. Numerous notifications that only our female lead can see keeps on popping up, much to her surprise. They tell her that she's now unlocked the ability of Rush and Cash. She blankly stares at them, thinking that perhaps they're an illusion, when suddenly, she remembers the deal she made with the demon Aftanis. He did say that she'll gain powers along with her new life, and this must be it. Well, looks like he didn't scam her after all. Unfortunately, she gets snapped back to reality when Duke Ferriton makes a comment about her saying his skin is soft like a baby. Stop daydreaming, female lead. Anyhow, the Duke merely puts her down on his lap and without another word continuously pokes his daughter's soft cheeks. The child also accepts this, seeing as how she's hoping the saying that touching your child's face will bring you closer to them. She starts thinking she's cute, but her father just bluntly states that she looks like an angry puffer fish. After the Duke adjourns the meeting, he brings the rather shocked female lead with him wherever he goes, only separating when he said it's time for her bath, though she's still a bit clean. While doing so, the lead thinks about why the Duke had been closer to her. Perhaps owing to her sudden show of affection, but she decides that's not the most important thing to think about. Besides, she has more important things to do, and now being alone in her room, she can finally go about it. Because she shifted her attention to the Duke earlier, the notifications disappeared, and so she successfully summoned them again. Turns out, the ability really is from a Fontes, though the devil reasons it's something that proves this whole thing isn't a scam. Though her attribute level is F, her ability allows her to summon rom fan novels and use the main character's abilities. With this, she can conquer the world. However, her daydreaming comes to a halt when another notification pops up. She's been given a new mission, one entitled Prove Your Worth. This indicates that life in a rom fan novel will never get easier. Anyway, her mission is to perfect her own ability with the condition of acquiring a summon medium. She'll also be rewarded with 500 cash. Naturally, she accepts the mission, but she has no idea where to get a summon medium. She thinks that perhaps it exists in the family heirlooms, but she's scared to ask for it directly from her father, and so she decides to sleep it off and think about it in the morning. Tons of maids attend to her when she wakes up, and she uses this opportunity to ask for and hint that she wants to see the family heirlooms. And turns out, she didn't need to go find her father, as he sends for her for breakfast. Despite the grand breakfast, the female lead feels like she's going to be sick, perhaps from being awkward with the Duke. A sudden newfound resolve burns within her, promising that she has to get used to her father eventually. And so she greets and thanks him for the meal with the biggest smile possible, though he doesn't acknowledge it. Oh, she even feels tears coming on as her efforts were dismissed. Anyhow, she gets distracted by how good the pudding tastes, and she wolfs it down without even noticing. And seeing his child without her favorite food, the Duke gives her his share, merely telling her to eat it before going back to his paper. The little girl could only mutter thank you. So he does pay attention to her. The awkwardness doesn't stop there, as after their meal, the Duke asks why she isn't sticking close to him. He suddenly reaches for her and carries her around the house again. This makes the female lead think about all the things he's done so far for her. He is usually gone for business by this time, but he waited for her. He's also let her accompany him everywhere, simply because she told him she likes to stick to him. She still feels embarrassed about it though, but she still has to find the summon medium. So when the Duke asks her what the matter is, she pounces on the opportunity, saying she'd like to look at pretty things. Anna also backed her up, saying that the young lady had asked about the family heirlooms earlier. She gets anxious, thinking the Duke will take that the wrong way, but he gets up to take her there without another word. This makes her think that perhaps her father is a good villain, if there ever is one, that is. Anyway, all the treasures she finds there in the room aren't really treasures, but more like spoils of war. The young lady glances around and a particular old book catches her attention, mainly because a notification alerted her it would be perfect with her ability. Looks like she finally found it. Turns out it's a sealed book, and though nothing is sealed inside it for the moment, it is kept because it was a founding Duke's most valued treasure. Even the young lady's persuasions didn't work on the Duke when she tried to ask for it. Suddenly, another notification pops up about a bonus mission, which is to persuade the Duke to give her the book. This time, the quest includes clues, and those are little hearts on the Duke's face. It means she has to kiss him. The young lady figures that the little hearts on her father's cheek means that she must kiss him. But seeing as she gets flustered thinking about it, she decides to calm down and convince him first instead. In the most innocent way possible, she again asks for the book, but this time she promises that she'll take care of it so that it won't get an owie. But all this does is create more little hearts around her father, and they've even started to say that she should kiss him. Now, that's a hint. And so she calls him to get closer to his face. All the while, she notes that the Duke's expression is that of one that doesn't know what's coming. She hugs her father's neck and plants a kiss on his cheek. For that sweet moment, even the assistant is shocked seeing his master receive affection. Without another word, the Duke stretches his hand and the seal on the book explodes and it flies to his grasp. The young lady concludes that perhaps her father didn't take it out to protect her if something really was sealed inside the book. The Duke's assistant reminds him of the historical significance of the book, wary that the young lady may destroy it accidentally. However, the Duke just glares at him to remind him of the true owner of the book. If looks could kill. The young lady continues to praise for her dad, and when another heart appears, she makes a mental note to strangle Aftanes if she ever gets the chance, but kisses her father regardless. Not like she can complain though, as when her mission is completed, she gains a ton of bonus cash tickets to spend for her ability. After quite an event, the Duke still brings his daughter to all his affairs, even the meeting with his advisors regarding keeping tabs on Marquis Terenka and his Mana Stone mining endeavor with his investors. It should have failed since the Mana Stones mined have no mana, but the Duke assumes the drunken slip of Marquel Chirodal that the Feraton name is being used by Terenka in his investment fraud. Our female lead isn't as clueless about all this either. She also arrives at the same conclusion as her father, that Terenka directly convinced his investors using their family name. That the Feraton name is being used by Terenka in his investment fraud. Duke Feraton can't help but be shocked with his daughter's apparent intelligence. The little lady, on the other hand, knowing she said too much, tries to reason that she heard her uncle, the Marquis, telling his investors that her father had also invested. Even if she's just trying to not sound weird, what she's saying also helps her father's counsel. She also recalls how her uncle showed supposed evidence from Duke Feraton, which is money inside his personalized envelope with the Duke's own seal. Unfortunately, the realization hits her. Her father really did give the Marquis money regardless. Judging by his counsel's reaction, it would be bad for the dukedom if word gets out he did so, and they'd be indicted for fraud. The Duke, however, keeps his eyes on his daughter and asks how she managed to hear that. The poor girl thinks she's being doubted, so she admits she heard it when the Marquis had her shine his shoes. However, the advisors reveal that all the money the Duke sent was for child support. This makes the young lady think how they're doubting her even more, so she lets out how she's been living under the Marquis. All the hardships, all the challenges, simply because her uncle made her believe she had been abandoned. Tears start to roll down on her cheeks, the poor girl. Suddenly, the Duke exposes his controlled anger, directing it at his advisors, who continuously pressured his daughter. Thick plumes of magical black smoke arose from his body, engulfing and choking his men. Though he was the first to question her, his actions made the girl think he was worried for her. He even reaches down to lift her up again. The Duke also notices her long and ripped sleeves, so he had a tailor sent for. Next thing she knows, the female lead wakes up alone in her room, so she assumes that Anna, her nanny, must have picked her up and put her to bed. Or perhaps your daddy. Regardless, she now has a chance to examine her summon medium since she's alone. Initially, she's scared of damaging the book since it's already old. But when she opens it, it begins to change appearance as if it's new. She thinks of all the magic inside, so she opens it again, and this time, a notification appears, telling her the medium has been unsealed and her ability is no longer restricted. The young miss is ecstatic to learn that she can finally use her ability. She's even given a quest to use it. Using some pretty elaborate incantation, she tries to summon a novel. However, she is gravely disappointed to find out she doesn't have enough cash. Oh, lack of money. A problem that exists both in the real world and fantasy world. Unfortunately, she happens to have 5,000 cash draw tickets, but she lucks out again for she only manages to gain 100 cash. She won't be able to summon a novel with just 1,100 cash. As she despairs her unfortunate circumstance, she remembers receiving a notification earlier. Upon opening it, she finds out that because Duke Feraton is at the highest satisfaction, she gets a reward. A novel rental ticket. Thanks to her daddy, she gets to use a whole novel temporarily. When the maids arrive to ready her for the day, she frantically hides the book under the covers. She is then horrified to learn that she apparently fell asleep on the Duke's lap. What's even worse is that he was the one to carry her to bed. The young miss is more than sure that she has to forfeit her life at this point. She shakily tells Anna to make sure this doesn't happen again, for the Duke might find her bothersome. Anna is bothered that she would think of such a thing when she sees how much the Duke adored the young miss. The little lady instantly feels guilty for making her maid worried, assuring her that she's fine. Anna continues by saying that she has always seen the Duke as someone flawless, but she has come to realize by observing how the Duke treats his daughter that he is actually clumsy. Meanwhile, foul Marquis Terenka is in a tight spot when one by one his investors started withdrawing. He even has to ensure that his father does not find out about the situation. In order to get control of the situation, he orders Clady to visit her cousin. The girl is as spoiled and self-centered as ever, but he manages to convince her to go. We can only expect this little creature to be especially evil to our dear little baby." The maids receive a bunch of drawings from their precious lady, and to say that they are happy is an understatement. The child's cute scribbles are able to pierce their heart and endear the girl to them even more. After they profess their eternal devotion to the young miss, they inform her that it is time for her to visit the glass greenhouse. This overjoys her to the point that she carelessly runs. Unfortunately, she ends up tripping and falling to the ground. She is in tears because of her clumsiness, and at that moment, the Duke finds her. He questions why she's in that state, so she explains what has happened. She is quite annoyed that the Duke does not instantly understand that little children tend to fall down a lot. She manages to charm her daddy to carry her, and as a secret softie, the Duke does so instantaneously. His expression turns cold, however, when he sees the bruises on her knee. He carries the child back to the manor despite her protests. He comments about how weak she is again, so the young miss overthinks again that she'll get abandoned for it. But the Duke surprises everyone by putting the medication on himself. Even though he is wearing a frightening expression, he is quite gentle to her. That is when they are informed of the arrival of the people from the boutique. Rather than putting the child down and going to his own affairs, the Duke makes quite a spectacle when he carries his daughter all the way to the drawing room, intent on staying with her. The designer, Eutrophilia, is sure that she's meeting someone fearsome like the rest of the Faraton Duchy. But the moment the Duke enters with the young miss, she can't believe her own eyes. In the arms of the infamously threatening Duke is the cutest and softest baby there is. She observes that the Duke must adore his daughter, so much to the point that he does not even put her down when her measurements are being taken. Using her skills in flattery, she comments that the lady must like the Duke so much, seeing as she is behaving in his arms. Dismissively, the Duke explains that they are only like that because the child wants to stick to him like glue. "Oh, Mr. Duke, you obviously love doting on your daughter. No need to act so tough." The vassals also take this opportunity to flatter the Duke by announcing how much the young miss likes her father. The young miss is becoming increasingly confused by the way they're acting. But then she sees that slight smile that formed on the Duke's face before he turns away. One vassal then boldly asks her how much she likes the Duke. After some deliberation, the young miss shows a gesture with her thumb and index finger, measuring a small portion, announcing that that's how much she likes her daddy. Hearing the words that the little girl has uttered, the vassals begin preparing to meet their end. They can practically feel as well as see how much darker and heavier that Duke's aura has become. In their moment of despair, the lady clarifies that the small amount is to be subtracted from everything in the universe. That is how much she likes her daddy. She is just using her charms once again, and boy is it effective. When asked why she has taken out a small portion, she quickly comes up with an answer by saying that she'll like her daddy even more if they spend more time together. As she nuzzles against her father, she rejoices that she manages to get past that sticky situation with ease. However, when she looks up, she is disappointed to see his cold expression, assuming that he does not like her affection. But then, to everyone's surprise, the Duke declares that he'll buy every dress that the boutique has sent, filling Yucha's pockets to her delight. But he has a condition: the cuffs must not cover her palms in any way. That is when the little miss realizes that the Duke does not want her to ever attempt to polish anyone's shoes with her sleeves. Aw, her dad may look like a block of ice, but he is incredibly thoughtful. Later on, Clady arrives at the Faraton Duchy, and her jaw drops upon seeing its opulence. When she arrives, she acts all privileged like the spoiled brat that she is, even though she's literally visiting from someone else's house. She enters with her head held high, even when the butler is still speaking to her about her unexpected arrival. She is amazed at how grand the manor is, even more so when she sees the majestic portrait of her uncle. She even has the audacity to think that the Duke will dote on her more than his own daughter, still convinced that her cousin is an illegitimate child. Ugh, this kid really gets on my nerves. Clady rushes to see the young miss of Faraton, expecting to see her scrawny and ill-dressed cousin. But the girl she meets is a completely different person. The young lady does not even recognize her present, and bratty Clady is irked by this. She calls her cousin brazen, but the little lady reminds her that she is the uninvited guest who does not greet her. Clady then begins acting high and mighty, calling the young miss shameless when she isn't even the Duke's daughter. With an evil smile on her face, she tells her cousin how she does not deserve the Faraton surname. Jeez, I have never hated a child more than I do now. Clady's words pain the young miss, knowing that there's a possibility of her words being true. That is when an unexpected quest appears before her. She is tasked to get rid of the sweet potato with cider, aka she must rid herself of this unpleasant person before her. The price for this quest is 2,000 cash draw tickets. And just like in the real world, cash is a great motivator, which is why she easily accepted the challenge. She then stands her ground and begins talking back at Clady, clapping back so hard that the irksome girl is speechless for a moment. Despite Clady's continuous stream of mean words to bring her down, she does not back down. She reminds her cousin that she has no right to call Lady Ferriton arrogant, pointing out her lack of etiquette at the same time. Predictably, Clady mentions her apparent illegitimacy once again, desperately trying to gain the upper hand. With a cold look in her eyes, she challenges Clady to take responsibility for her words and to swear on the Terenka Marquis state. The arrogant girl does this, not expecting the young miss to call upon her servants. Horrified, Clady acts as if she is the victim before the servants, claiming that the young miss is being mean to her. The young miss is stumped by the sudden turn of events, memories of her being alone fresh on her mind. That is when her loyal maids begin defending her, hiding her behind them to protect her. Still dedicated to being the victim, Clady even declares that she has brought a gift for the young miss, an old dress of hers that she's seen her cousin eyeing before. Clady forcefully makes her take the dress, claiming that as her Oni, she will forgive her. Gosh, such insolence! Before she can manipulate the young miss further, a booming voice is heard around them. The Duke has arrived, and he is asking why someone who has stolen his daughter's clothes has so many words to give. Yay! Daddy has arrived! Moving on. Turns out, the Duke was in the Imperial meeting hall earlier. He overheard some officials talk about how their children love it when they buy them something special themselves rather than asking the footman to buy them. It was apparently more significant when a father buys stuff for their children personally. He even demands to know where a shop that sells eclairs is, intending to get a sweet kiss from his daughter for it. However, he is interrupted when he is informed of something that has happened in the duchy. Without hesitation, the Duke exits the meeting with a dark aura surrounding him. It was obvious that the Duke did not look happy, the reason being that Lady Terenka had visited his precious daughter. Ercole decided to comment on how good it was that the Duke was cherishing and adoring his daughter. The Duke once again chalked it up to her being of the Ferriton bloodline and his responsibility to guard her until she comes of age. But then the Duke mentioned how strange his youngest was. Other than the obvious lack of magic, the way she acted was incomprehensible to him. What was even more confusing was how he was reacting. His tender emotions toward her were so abnormal to him. Poor guy can't even recognize affection to save himself. Oh. The aide realized then that his master, the pride and joy of the Empire, is just a fool for his daughter. That he is. He only wishes that the Duke will someday recognize these symptoms for what they are. As the Duke speeds to his estate, his thoughts revolve around the treacherous Marquise Terenka, thoughts that would no doubt not end well for the worst uncle in the world. Back in the present, Clady instantly brightens upon seeing the Duke, running towards him as if they are so close. But then she is pathetically left hanging when the Duke does not even spare her a glance by passing her to reach his daughter. Clady turns to see that the Duke has hugged the young miss unprompted, someone who isn't actually his daughter. She immediately assumes that the Duke has misunderstood her, thinking that her cousin has spoken poorly of her to her uncle. With so much audacity filling her little body, Clady declares that she forgives the Duke for believing in the young miss's lies, and that she even apologizes on behalf of her cousin for lying about her. Honestly, I can't with this kid. Her arrogance and self-importance are staggering. The young miss begins feeling depressed. She is jealous of how her cousin manages to be this confident, for she has received love all her life. Clady has never needed to question her place in this world the way she had to. But the Duke's expression only becomes increasingly frightening until he questions the young Lady Terenka why he saw her wearing the dress that he had prepared for his daughter the day he arrived to fetch her. Oh, so that dress was not hers all along! Karma is a force to be reckoned with indeed. The little Lady of Ferriton then realizes that her father was not displeased by her that day. He is talking about how pitiful she looked when he went to retrieve her. Clady is frantic as she denies his allegation, claiming that her father had gifted her that dress for her birthday, just like he always does every year. She then makes the horrible mistake of pointing at the young miss and calling her a moron. Darkness suddenly invades the room, and Clady drops to the floor in an instant. When he learns that the people at the Marquis's estate have grown accustomed to calling his daughter a moron, the Duke's anger is indescribable. At this point, Clady is fearing for her life, remembering the tales of Ferriton's cruelty. But she just doesn't have that much tact, apparently, because she calls the young miss a dirty, illegitimate child, angering the Duke further. Good thing the Duke figures that it is better for her to be alive anyway, harshly telling her to scram. Later on, the young miss finds herself resting on her father's lap. She remembers how everything turned black when Clady called her a moron, so she doesn't know what happened after that. As she enjoys a warm drink, the Duke is coldly looking at the soldiers before him. He tells them how a bug managed to enter the duchy and how it is their fault for not doing their duties properly. He asks them how they should be punished, and without batting an eyelash, the soldiers declare that they will repay their mistake with their lives. Naturally, the child is horrified by the idea, especially since the whole ordeal happened because of her. Right when the soldiers are about to use their own swords, the little lady protests loudly, stopping them in their tracks. She explains that it is normal for kids to quarrel, so punishment for the soldiers is not needed. She then drinks her beverage again, and the Duke notices that she has a milk mustache. He wipes it and licks his finger like it's the most normal thing in the world. Meanwhile, the people around them are in disbelief upon seeing their master do such a fatherly action. What's more is that the soldiers are looking at her with so much gratitude. With just some simple yet adorable actions, she manages to gain the respect of most of the people in the duchy. Because of her increase in influence, she is rewarded with 5,000 cash. All thanks to our little lady's charms. Later in her room, she's incredibly sleepy and is waiting for her quest calculations. When it is finished, she is horrified to learn that it is a partial failure. How can this be? She thinks it as a success because Clady was sent back home. Turns out it was not enough, for even she got a penalty for being a flat cider, aka failing to give a satisfying way to get rid of unpleasantness. Her reincarnation buffer will randomly disappear at any time. Unfortunately, she isn't entirely sure what a buff even is. At that moment, the Duke enters her chamber. Ken, I just pointed out, there is absolutely no reason for him to be this attractive. Come on, I can't concentrate. When the Duke sits down on her bed, she realizes what exactly the penalty was. She will act like a regular child at any moment, saying things like "fwood" and "gimme gookie," much to the Duke's confusion. She can't believe that she'll lose her thinking skills at any moment, turning into a total baby. Suddenly, the Duke asks her about Architus, the heirloom book she has borrowed, which is now her mediator item. Unfortunately, due to the punishment, she accidentally tells the Duke that the old and fragile book has become prettier. The Duke's expression becomes serious after this, but the young miss is busy being like a kid to be scared. Instead, she pats the Duke's hair and talks about random things. By the time she comes back to herself, the Duke is already quite dead set on finding out more about the book. The young miss is internally panicking, not knowing how to fix the situation. She can't just tell him the truth because that book is precious to the Phaeton. She doesn't want to be labeled a troublemaker for ruining it. Gathering all her courage, the young miss does the only thing she could think to do at that moment. Later on, Heinz finds his master gazing pensively out the window. Out of all the words he expects the Duke to utter, asking him if he is ugly is not one of them. How can a guy who is literally the reincarnation of Adonis be insecure about his looks? Turns out the young miss, as a strategy, threw a tantrum earlier. She continually denied that the Duke was her father because he scared and glared at her. She then declared that her daddy was a handsome daddy, implying that the Duke was not handsome. She then continued that her real daddy was rich and loved her so much. By the way, I would like to get in with all this daddy action, although for an entirely different context. Nothing. Let's continue. The Duke rationally thought that the girl was still a member of the Phaeton Duchy, and that he should be disappointed with her for ruining the book and being irresponsible, but strangely, he didn't want to punish her. Instead, he wanted to comfort her. He began reaching out to her, but the child tearfully declared that she hated him. The poor guy's feelings were obviously so hurt. Oh. At present, in the middle of recounting the occurrence to Heinz, the Duke sees the maids giggling about something they are holding. With a menacing expression, he demands to see what they are looking at, so Anna is forced to give the piece of paper to him. Turns out, it's the young miss's drawing for her, even though she looks like a pineapple in the picture. He even learns that the other maids have gotten pictures from the young lady as well. The maids then flatter him by saying that the drawings that the lady has given him are probably way superior to theirs. After all, he is her father. Unaware, the maids continue chattering about what kind of drawings the young lady might have gifted to him, which only fouls his mood even more. With a dark aura, he reveals to them that he did not receive a single drawing from his daughter. Nancy and the other personnel of the house starts a meeting with the Duke Phaeton about recent events regarding his daughter. Actually, the Duke seems to take this more seriously and more calmly than his other official business meetings. Anyhow, the maids analyze that the Duke made his daughter cry and that he hasn't received a drawing from her. The only possible conclusion? She hates her dad. Nancy could have said this better, though, judging by her peer's expression. I mean, that is the Duke you're talking to. But actually, the Duke wasn't angry, but rather seemed hung up on the fact that his daughter said he wasn't her real dad, on top of hating him when Anna had asked him about it. The maids immediately try asking if the Duke had been gentle in talking with the little lady, and asks him if he ever feels anything when he's with her. Like a father who doesn't know he's being a great dad, admits that he does cherish the moments he spends with his daughter. Upon seeing the genuine concern on the Duke's face, the maids urge him to visit his daughter again. But this time, the Duke asks what the words yummy and cookies mean, the exact words his daughter had rambled before. The staff gets a stern look in their eyes, as if they finally figure out how to bring the father and daughter together again. Speaking of, she still feels pretty bummed out because of the way she acted, and because of her stupid punishment. Anna suddenly asks if she wants a snack, to which she says no to. But suddenly, the Duke enters the room carrying a plate of cookies. After a second of silence, he, as innocent as can be, declares, "Let's yummy," in order to get his daughter to eat. He's unintentionally funny. Anyway, the snack helps the two get closer again, and the Duke begins talking in honorifics in an effort to follow Anna's advice to be respectful. He assures his daughter that no one will hurt her again, and his daughter realized he had come to comfort her. He also asks her if she'd like to say anything else, but trying to avoid another fight, she lies and says no. But the Duke cuts her off, admitting his fault on letting Marquise Terenka take care of her, and says that she can cry. This leads his daughter to burst into tears, finally letting out all the pain she had, thinking her father had abandoned her. The Duke pulls her close, where she felt his warmth, and again says sorry. He's truly a candidate for Best Fictional Father. It makes me cry. Another morning, the Duke Ferriton is again in another meeting. However, as his advisors notice, a certain weird sound echoes throughout the room, and what's more, it seems to bother the Duke. Finally, the Duke leaves the meeting abruptly and strolls towards the gardens of his estate, where his daughter is gleefully running. It also seems that the sound is coming from her shoes, something that is actually quite cute. However, they thought the Duke would be angry, but on the contrary, he merely picked up his daughter and warned her that she'll fall again if she runs like that. Even a hint of a smile forms on his face. Back at the meeting, this time his daughter on his lap, the Duke declares he has an important announcement. He lifts his daughter's shoes and presses them from a certain area, making a sound. Turns out he made them so that he'll know when she's walking and it'll change when she's running. He orders his men to immediately protect his daughter when it happens, regardless of what happens to his men. The Duke's so unintentionally funny when he goes overboard protecting his daughter. Anyhow, the Reformation ceremony and his daughter's appearance on it is mentioned during the meeting, and the Duke dismisses it, seeing as she's too young to deal with old aristocrats. The advisors state that they'll cross out her name from the sheet, and suddenly it hits her. Our heroine has never learned her name. Come to think of it, there hasn't been any mention of her name, and it's 18 chapters in. She innocently asks her father about it, and also her age. This, however, garners a shocked and pitiful reaction from the advisors present. Suddenly, the meeting is adjourned, and she finds herself alone. She begins to doubt if her question was meaningless, but truthfully, she never had anyone refer to her by her name. The Marquise and Clady had always degraded her with terms like illegitimate child. When her father comes in, she comes to realize that same as the last time, he drops the topic because he doesn't want her to remember bad memories. And so she says she doesn't care about a name, since he's already there taking care of her. But she does have one, and the Duke tells her that her name is Rostisa. It triggers a distant memory for her, perhaps her mother, and Rostia cries and caresses her father's hand as he says her name again. Rostisa wakes up next to her father, which makes the young girl flustered, seeing as they never really had that interaction before. What's more, she notices tear marks on the Duke's clothes, which are clearly from her, adding to her shyness. The Duke then tries to leave and attend to his documents, perhaps to let his daughter sleep in peace. But Rostisa adamantly refuses to let him go, and with teary puppy eyes, even saying she will hate him if he really does leave. Actually, she's just regressing into a child because of her punishment. Nonetheless, the Duke decides to stay, and Rostisa sees her father take off his tear-stained upper garments. She asks him if he's in pain, making the Duke smile, thinking she's referring to him hitting a pillow. But actually, Rostisa has seen his large scar near his left hip, and the Duke gets a rather unreadable expression in his eyes, as he dismisses his innocent daughter's concerns. He instead covers her eyes, reasoning that his scar looks ugly. Perhaps the Duke is still hurt with Rostisa's accidental comments from before. His child asks him if he was injured in the war, to which the Duke replies he wasn't. And so Rostisa scoots closer to her father and tries to blow on her father's long-healed scar. Oh, how cute! She even says she's doing it now because she couldn't help ease her father's pain before. Though the Duke assures her that he's no longer in pain, Rostisa is adamant about helping because she believes there's no pain that does not hurt people. The Duke is also aware of this, aware of the ominous glances that exist in their world, aware that it is his duty to protect his daughter from it all. He reveals that ever since he got his daughter back, he's been visiting her every night up until he had to leave for a war, which explains why she never saw him. He wasn't worried about it though. He wasn't even wounded in battle. His only worry was that he had to go home quickly for his daughter. Rostisa finally realizes that her father hadn't abandoned her. About that, the Duke also apologizes for leaving her with Marquise Tarenka. He also reveals magic isn't an innate ability, and it had killed his sons before. It turns out that he had offered to take care of her, and believing that his child would be cared for and away from other magicians, the Duke agreed. Rostisa wonders why her father apologizes when it was her uncle at fault. Regardless, the Duke wants her to know that he never did abandon her, and no matter what, he'll always be a father. Actually, despite all her conditions for reincarnation, it turns out that all Rostisa wanted was a loving family. At least she has that with the Duke. Rostisa and her father decide to have tea in their gardens. Rostisa finally learns that she's 4 years old, and according to her father, she was born on October 11th. Unfortunately, this means that her birthday has already passed for this year. Seeing his daughter's reaction, the Duke promises that her birthday next year will be grander than that of royal celebrations. Come to think of it, Rostisa thinks that her father is feeling guilty about missing all those birthdays. Actually, the Duke sends her birthday dresses every year, though Clady steals it. And so our heroine feels loved, knowing despite all the trouble her father faced during the war, he never forgot to celebrate his only daughter's birthday. That relief doesn't last long, though, as Rostisa admits she thought the Duke hated her birthday. Also, she can't very well say that it was supposedly because her mother had an affair. The truth was, her uncle had lied that her mother died while giving birth to her. The Duke's red eyes glowed with anger, but they immediately calmed when he called his daughter closer. Having her sit on his lap, the Duke reveals that it was Rostisa's mother who named her, and she was alive long enough to even breastfeed her. So it was her in her distant memories. He finishes by saying her birthday is something worth celebrating, and he also promises that he'll never miss another one again. Rostisa takes her father's hands, and although they're rough, there's nothing bigger and warmer in the whole world. And so she asks him if they make a promise. She makes one where he'll be her dad no matter what, and he agrees to it. After a convoluted handshake that leaves the Duke stumped. Meanwhile, during the Duke's meeting with his advisors, the entire room fills with outrage at the mistreatment their young lady experienced under Marquise Tarenka, especially of the fact that her name was kept from her. The Duke is angry too, but he remains calm enough to ask what the Marquise's situation was. Fortunately, it seems that the business scam he's running is taking a major hit. The order to cut off the capital has already been executed, and more astute investors either withdrew or questioned the entire thing. Duke Ferriton thinks that the Marquise is every bit a person trying to gain financial power, trying to become one of the rich that stands above the poor aristocracy. What's even more chilling is the fact that the Duke, almost like a promise, says that the Marquise's suffering is not enough. What are you plotting there, Duke? Rostisa finds herself enjoying a rather heavenly sleep, complete with the sun shining ever so gracefully in her room. Unfortunately, even this moment of peace gets interrupted, and the young girl reminds whoever woke her up that being 4 years old, she still needs sleep, begins to complain. But actually, it isn't a who, but rather a what. Out of the blue, a new task popped up. This one, entitled Self-Revenge, notifies Rostisa that now isn't the time to sleep, as her father, the Duke Ferriton, is now plotting to take revenge against the Marquise. Her anger turns into excitement, mainly because she rightly guessed her father would be ruthless in seeking revenge. Unfortunately, this new mission has another idea. It turns out that it wants Rostisa to take revenge all on her own. But what could a 4-year-old child achieve in terms of revenge? Regardless, the notification proceeds to give her the conditions of the mission. To fulfill it, she must recover the property that the Marquise had bought from the maintenance fee given by the Duke, specifically the Mana Quarry ownership and the Mana Stone Excavation Authority. When she tried to ask the prompt for a hint, unfortunately, it increased the chance for tasteless soda, the punishment that makes her go back to a child, to occur at random. However, completing the challenge will remove the punishment entirely. Rostisa remembers how the punishment had complicated things before, and so, with this newfound inspiration, she gladly accepts the challenge. With her first move, she finally decides to make use of the book that allows her to summon. she decides to summon the novel I Seduced 10 Men in the Reverse Harem World to make use of the main character's ability. Well, that's some name for a novel. With her current level, Rostisa can make use of only 5 abilities, but she can only pick one. It all works out because she got the ability to essentially read people's emotions and thoughts and have it displayed to her for 3 hours. Unfortunately, it seems that because the novel she chose is unfinished, the power she gets from it gets reduced, leaving Rostisa dejected from the constant ups and downs from using her ability for the first time. I can't help thinking Rostisa really got scammed with this deal of hers. Speaking of the devil, the Marquis is currently in a business meeting with all his big-time investors, and things aren't going well for him, mainly because they've all heard Duke Ferraton hasn't invested. But Marquis Terenka used the Duke's envelopes with his seal in order to fool the other men, and he twists the story in order to indicate that the Duke is trying to get the other investors to back off in order to monopolize the profit. Never realized the Marquis had such a silver tongue! Terenka leaves the room for a bit, confident of his lies, when one of his servants informs him of the arrival of their guest, the Princess of Ferraton, Rostisa. The Marquis of Terenka confirms whether or not Rostisa arrived alone. When he learns that she did, he has sent her to the greenhouse. Apparently, he thinks the girl has been abandoned by the Duke, therefore now he has one more thing to exploit. By just using her, he can gain access to the Duke's money. He bids his servant to inform him of the investor's decision. Meanwhile, he'll go see Rostisa. A devious smile forms on his face, thinking that he's so smart because of his new plan. Trust me, man, you are not smart. You're even way off on your assumption. But he finds that out for himself. Imagining that the girl is overwhelmed and delighted by the small comfort of seeing him in his beloved greenhouse, the Marquis's jaw almost drops to the ground when he sees Rostisa not only calm, but wearing some expensive clothes. So he decides to go straight to the point, acknowledging that her life is a little better now. But if he's straight to the point, so is she. Rostisa declares that she came back to take all her money the Marquis had taken. Immediately after, she activates her ability, allowing her to see the Marquis's emotions as he retorts back. Anger is the emotion that pops off of him, but really, she doesn't need to be polite for someone like the Marquis. He tries to say how ungrateful the child is after being accused of stealing money, all the while Rostisa's power keeps on popping up. She calmly says that his monostone mining business has all been built on her money, to which the flustered Marquis accidentally admitted that it was from her father's money. He did not like falling for a child's trap, by the way. But he's actually not worried about the money he covered up as an investment, but rather the mining quarry itself, as Rostisa finds out due to her ability. Using that, she made him so nervous that he can't even fight back with words. The Marquis gets saved, though, when his servant comes to get him. Rostisa, guessing that the investors are still the Marquis's guest, decides to follow him. The investors were all about to agree with the Marquis's plan, but fortunately, her arrival stops it, and with her charm, she even manages to sway the others as she accuses her uncle of embezzlement. The other aristocrats actually just laughed off Rostisa as a child using big words, accepting the Marquis's defense that a child has no knowledge of business and spending money. Oh, but our heroine came prepared with all the answers. Rostisa, still keeping the innocence of a child, simply questions why her father, who provided so much money in the first place, needed investment money from the Marquis when it was better to just invest himself. The Marquis is being caught in his sleazy moves. So satisfying. As a final nail to the coffin, Rostisa also brought a book recording her father's expenses. Knowing it will be his downfall, the Marquis tries to grab it first, but one of the investors, Duke Delvatren, manages to take it first. It seems that the Duke Ferraton's money was enough from last year, and none of it was missing. This exposed Marquis Terenka's scam. Initially, he planned to profit from the monostone quarry, but monostones don't naturally have mana. And so, he planned to have all 3 of his investors take the fall, and hopefully have Rostisa's father indicted. It's actually downright funny how the Marquis's emotions turned from wanting to sew the child's mouth shut to expressing great joy in eliminating her simply because he got outsmarted by a 4-year-old. And with that, Rostisa manages to force her uncle to return all the properties bought using her father's money. Not without teasing the Marquis about how little he can only pay back her father. All that teasing got the Marquis even glitching because of emotional overload. Rostisa manages to charm the pants off of all the aristocrats that were the Marquis's investors, though, especially Duke Delvatren. All 3 of them agreed that the Ferraton house has made a suitable heir. As she leaves, interestingly, Marquis Swellrodell, one of the investors, thinks the child's face was familiar. Yet surely it wasn't the same servant girl in Terenka's house from before. Yes, she is, unfortunately. But as they put it, she's like a tree that grows regardless of the soil, so they're eager to see her grow. And in fact, they're not the only ones proud of her. Bayraton's assistant, who had accompanied Rostisa, can't help but cry at how proud and mature the young lady was in handling business, truly heir to their house. Though he also mentions how it's too bad that she didn't inherit magic gas, her father's deadly ability. But compared to her terrifying father's feat of catching a monster at a young age, Rostisa's actions were more touching. Seems like something those two things are something a child shouldn't do, but that's just me. Speaking of the Duke, he suddenly arrives behind the two, clearly jealous that someone else is spending time with his beautiful daughter. The servant could do nothing but stay in a constant state of shock and fear as the Duke approached them. It seems that the Duke's reputation as a jealous father is well known. The poor Rostisa can't understand what's going on, though, and is still a bit confused as her father dragged the poor assistant away, who looked like a corpse the way he's so stiff with fear. Anyhow, she gets distracted from her father's antics by the house staff, who greets her lovingly as she arrives on the estate. As radiant as the sun, she smiles back at the people who always welcome her home. The family then decides to have tea in the gardens again, but it seems the Duke is distracted. He can't understand how his daughter is able to sway lots of people, even him. His assistant just laughs at him because he doesn't understand how much love he has for his daughter. Also, funny enough, the Duke tries to teach Rostisa about handling kidnappers and not following strange men, but his plan backfires on him when she doesn't allow him to touch her either, leaving the poor Duke dejected. But that night, the Duke finally decides to act against the Marquise, even attacking his mansion using his magic gas, and without covering his face. Of course, the Marquise's guards stand no match against the battle-hardened Duke. Marquise Terenka tries to talk his way out of getting killed, even threatening that his father would not approve of this. When the Duke pays him no heed, Marquise calls him brother-in-law and admits that his wife's persecution was, in fact, his own fault. He also rambles about how his sister had an affair, making Rostisa her illegitimate child. This finally catches the Duke's attention. So guys, what do you think of this story so far? Please subscribe and turn on notifications for updates on this and all our other stories, so you can be the first to find out when they're out. Thank you so much for your support. See you in the next one!